Sri Baljit Singh Beri completed his BTech and MTech Electronics and Communication from IIT Delhi. He is ex-senior director and head Medical Electronics and Telemedicine Division, Department of Information Technology, Ministry of Communications IT, Government of India. His major role was in the area of electronics and information technology applied to healthcare. He is instrumental in giving shape to starting an integrated, focused program in promoting the area of electronics and healthcare in India from the Department of IT. He has been involved in formulation of nucleus set of recommended standards for practice of telemedicine activity in India to streamline established of telemedicine centers and standardized services available from the different telemedicine centers. At present, he is advisor to Center for Development of Advanced Computing and Media of Asia, both Government of India organizations and the Ministry of Communication IT for health informatics, medical electronics and acceptive devices. I request now the chair is ready to conduct a session.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are already more than 1 hour behind schedule. I think I will straight away invite the panelists, my co-panelists, Ms. Chitrangani Mubarak, Professor Arun Mehta, and Dr. Baharul Islam. Please join me on the podium, please. Dr. Dr. Islam. Okay. First, I will quickly introduce the eminent panelists, and then I will have say a few words about the session, and then I think I will invite the panelists to present their thoughts for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll open the house for discussion and then summarize. We'll maintain the time, I hope. I'll start with the lady. Dr. Chitrangani Mubarak. She is a program manager Ict agency of Sri Lanka organization, mandated for implement the Sri Lanka initiative. This organization, CM, is responsible for a key program area, namely e-society program, the goal of which is to take the benefits of ICT to all of society. Prior to this assignment, she was the director in Sri Lanka Expert Development Board. See, what I will do is I will introduce the panelists right away, and then I think go ahead with our program. Professor Arun Mehta is an electrical engineer. He is sitting on my right. Electrical engineer and computer scientist who was studied and taught in India, the US and Germany. He is one of India's early telecom and cyber activists, trying to obtain consumer-friendly policies that would help the spread of modern communications in rural areas and among the poor. His current passions include village radio and technology for the disabled. He is a professor and chairman of the computer engineering department of JMIT Nodor. He has another great distinction. He did some pioneering work for one of the famous persons. I think we all know Professor Hawkins, you see. And I think his speaking machine, he has a major role to play in his speaking machine. Dr. K.M. Baharul Islam on my left has been working in the area of ICT policies and e-government in Asia and Africa for more than a decade. He has recently taken over as the chairman and CEO of the South Asian Regional Development Gateway. Starting career as a university faculty in computational linguistics, he has taken keen interest in broadening the ICT implications for mass access and development use. He initiated and headed the Center of Educational Technology at the National Institute of Technology, Silchar, India, where he taught for 8 years. Since 1999, Dr. Islam is presently the chairman, the rank of Minister of State for State Rural Technology Promotion Council in the government of Assam, India. He has been involved in Cambodia, Rwanda, and Ethiopia on various UNESCO and UNDP initiatives. Presently, he is a consultant on ICT policy and e-government at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asian and the Pacific. Dr. Islam is also an advocate and did his LLM in IT and Telecom Law at the University of Strathclyde. He is a scholar of Masters of Population Studies program at the International Institute of Population Science, Mumbai. His recent works include e-government strategy and NICI policy for the Zambia. Okay. I think now we'll start. You see, we have seen over the years how the emphasis. One very pleasant thing which I have seen over the years is the kind of emphasis now which is being given to what I used to feel earlier as socially neglected areas. It invariably, whenever from budget to budget, and we used to look for allocations. The day I started my career, percentage-wise, we were always, disappointed that the kind of allocation which should increase for social areas like health, education, and other this thing never used to happen. Moderate increases, yes, but I think things have changed. As we all know, recently how much emphasis and resource allocation is coming into these very, very important areas. In health, we know that National Rural Health Mission, education, employment generation. Certainly, we had a taste of it when Dr. Muralidharan from Planning Commission was making his presentation. When so much is happening in these areas, and along with that, one particular technology has emerged as a pusher for a lot of applications. Can't we have a look at these tools which are becoming increasingly available? When government is giving so much emphasis, can this technology push these areas at a even faster pace? This is something I think which is happening, and we have. Hello. And we had a taste of this in the morning when the various panel in the inaugural session speakers gave their glimpses of the activities which are taking place in this particular area, and ICT is playing a role. I can tell you there are few more things happening in the country, and I think internationally. Why ICT applications are progressively can be applicable? Look at the infrastructure which is coming up, communication infrastructure. It is not only that government is setting up through E1 and the SWAN and all that. Simultaneously, the private players are also introducing. We have seen the revolution which this mobile technology has brought. Can this technology be another wheel for pushing this ICT into social areas to take them to greater heights? Can we look at these trends which this mobile technology is bringing in as a communication media? Other computing technology, I remember clearly, see, I have been handling the telemedicine, and in the mid-90s when I started my focus on this technology, and as a matter of fact, we started thinking of doing some pilots, etc. I knew that I'm looking at a kind of utopian exercise. Setting up a system in a rural area or even a district hospital connecting with a super specialty. Look, I used to wonder the cost of the computers, etc. A PC used to cost lakhs. STD call used to cost it used to switch at 2 seconds, 1 rupee per 2 seconds. A consultation of a patient from a remote to a super specialty for 15 minutes, the communication cost used to be more than 300 rupees. But the trends were very discernible. Communication costs were coming down. Computing systems or the platforms, their costs were coming down. And that's how so many initiatives could come in that area. So naturally, we are still having those trends which are giving an indication that this is a technology which can play a real major role in social sectors, agriculture, health, education. See, the other day, a very interesting thing, one of my very senior officer friend, the Minister of Agriculture, he was posing a problem. See, he is looking at plant protection and different kind of crop protection areas. He says, Mr. Vedi, you are part of this, early part of the Ministry of Communication. You are from agencies which are looking at these things. No, in agriculture we have 4 agencies which are collecting data about plants and crops from different sources. And they had their own workers appointed which go around and manually collect the data and then different recording mechanisms, and 4 different organizations gather the data. And when this is collated, we find that a lot of data is at variance from the same regions. And then they had their own doubts that you see that perhaps the worker, the appointed officer may not even go to the field. They may be collecting and data and sending some reports which do not match. Question is, now the kind of data when say a plant agriculture worker, such official, if he goes to a field and looks at the plant and keys in the data, so instead of a handwritten this thing which he can sit under a banyan tree, a register, fill up and create a report. Instead, if a mobile handheld machine unit can be given where the requisite formats are there, and through GIS, some information also gets embedded that yes, at this particular appointed time, on this particular day, he was actually in that field, and from where he sent the data. Suddenly we will have a validated, very effective this thing. Can't we, isn't it possible? I think it's very possible. This is the technology trend. Now, you see, I was part of our planning mission working group meeting, and the major concern was being shown at the National Health Management Information System. It was the feeling was that it was not highly validated, this thing. So what possible means can be used? Can ICT help there? Can health workers at different levels can be empowered? So that instead of carrying those 13, 14 big registers going to each level, filling up manually, and then bringing all the data to a primary health center, and then again manually loading that data in the other registers, and then somehow sending that to the district headquarters. Can that be avoided and by just use of ICT technology? Some handheld device which will include all the registers, so that the information can be taken once in a fortnight to a primary health center, where if there is any connectivity and a PC, the data can start traveling up in no time, authenticated data, and which gives incentives also for a health worker. Under Rural Health Mission, we are appointing lakhs of ASHA workers. Now, can their capacity building be done through this distant learning? Can the programs of immunization, how to give an injection, medication, etc., can they be empowered in such a way that they do not have to travel too many distances? Bring them to a block level where SWAN connectivity is there, where we can set up something and empower those workers and train them how to do bandaging, how to give immunization, injection. And not only that, once it is done, it can be updated after a year or year when the new programs come. So these are some of the thoughts which come to mind, and I think we'll have a more serious look at various areas and various trends which are coming, and the challenges. When we talk about challenges, I will narrate a very interesting thing. See, we from Department of IT, we were setting up a lot of pilot schemes in telemedicine. I mean, I don't know whether it's the ICT this thing or not, but I was very keen that one of the directors of Southern Hospital, he was from Bihar, and he knew that there are a lot of patients who used to come to his hospital, and he wanted to set up a system and offer consultations to people to district hospital in Bihar. Somehow the thing didn't come up. When we inquired from the local hospital, why you are not interested? Don't you want your patients to be consulted by specialists where they physically have to travel all the way to Delhi, where a number of them can be just given advice and treated at district level hospital. Privately, one of the district hospital in charge tells me, see, it's not that we don't want to help our patient. Problem is, you are going to give computers to us who will keep the safe custody of those computers, hardware. Now, this was a very different angle and a challenge, that he was worried about the safe custody of the computer and the disco cameras and other equipment which go with it. Anyway, there will be so many other challenges also, when we discuss these issues. I think, start from my left and I think ask Dr. Chidramani to give us this thing. We'll restrict the presentation to 5 minutes. You can use PPT or you may like to speak. 5 to 7 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to just talk to you in the context of Sri Lanka and what we feel are the challenges in taking ICT to people. Well, from our point of view, there are 3 things. One is the infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mean both the infrastructure and affordable access. Infrastructure here, I don't mean roads and electricity. Sri Lanka is fairly okay when it comes to electricity. It's the actual computers, the computer hardware, and the connectivity, the affordable access that the people need to get to the ICT services. And the third thing is content. First, looking at infrastructure as it is in the country, my organization, that is the Information Communication Technology Agency of Sri Lanka, under a program we are implementing which is called the East Sri Lanka Initiative, we have a target of 1,000 knowledge centers to be set up in the country by middle of next year. I know it looks like a pittance when you talk of the 100,000 in India, but then Sri Lanka is that much smaller. In addition to the 1,000 knowledge centers that are coming up through our organization, there are also others like the Ministry of Science and Technology has a network of centers which is coming up. The Ministry of Education is setting up a schools net. So there are the infrastructure by way of computer hardware is coming up. So there is no worries there really. And when you look at affordable access, well, that also, when we started the knowledge centers, in the first 2 years, we had satellite connectivity. That was quite easy because we could just go and put up a satellite and the connectivity was there. But the cost was fairly high. It was like in Sri Lanka rupees, it was 34,000 rupees for a month we were paying. 2 years down the road, the connectivity cost has come down and today it's 11,000 and we think by next day it will be down to about 6,000 rupees. This is because in addition to our national Sri Lanka Telecom, other providers also have come on the scene. And we have 2 mobile operators and a landline operator who have come with alternative solutions. One, Dialog, which is our leading mobile operator, is now piloting WiMAX in 3 districts. And they have also introduced a 3G card. And the other, Sri Lanka Telecom, Suntel, which is another landline, has a CDMA. And Sri Lanka Telecom also has introduced ADSL. So connectivity also the picture doesn't look too bleak there. But when it comes to content, that is, I think, where the issue is. I mean, if people are going to use our centers and to make it worthwhile and to make up these centers sustainable, they must come and use the centers. And nobody is going to come there unless they perceive some use to their daily lives. So we are putting content that we think they would use, it's not going to work. we have to really put need-based functional content in local language. And that, I think, is the core issue that we in Sri Lanka need to address, because I mean, in the long run, like, I feel that if a rural farmer feels that if his child had access to the internet and to a computer, his child was going to be on par with a child in Colombo, he'll somehow get that computer, he'll make it work for him. He needs to understand that there is a use for him. So to do that, we have to provide those services. And in providing the content and services, the problems we run into, it's not something that one organization can do unilaterally. We have to tie up with so many others. You were talking of telemedicine, that's fine, but then we need the doctors, the Ministry of Health to back us. You talk of agriculture, you need the Department of Agriculture with their cyber extension officers to come in. If it's education, you need the Department of Education. So basically you need everybody who is a stakeholder to the development of the country to realize the importance of the content and back us on that. And on a continuous basis, because the services and content we provide would have to be updated on a regular basis. I guess, I mean, somewhere along the line we can talk in greater depth on content if you see that, if you agree with me that that is a key issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chindaram. Now I pass on the mic to Dr. Arun, Professor Arun Mehta.
Presentation, please. Thank you very much. We've heard some excellent presentations this morning, and what they've definitely highlighted is the gap that we have in connectivity, the digital divide that we call it. And the digital divide is of several kinds. You have the north-south, you have the gender divide, which means that men are far more likely to be having mobile phones. If there's only one phone in the household, it's the man. You have a divide also between rural and urban. And you want me to come there and do the presentation? I can do that. No, I'm quite happy to stand there and do it. Thank you. Yeah. Is that fine? Okay. Now, can you hear me? Is my voice being heard over there on the back? Now it's on. Okay. Can you hear me at the back? Okay, excellent. All right. So now, we have a lot of good news in the country with regard to IT, and we are justifiably proud of all the great things that we've achieved. But there are some problems. We have a large and a growing digital divide between north-south, we know about that, between urban and rural, we've talked about that, and gender, as I was mentioning, and very importantly also with regards to disability, that has also been talked about. The question is, if we do nothing, will these divides go down? And can we expect the companies that have been providing all this wonderful ADSL and WiMAX and everything else to us, can we expect that they will work towards reducing this digital divide? Having watched the telcos for many years, as many of you also have, the problem with their basic approach to telecommunications is a centralized one. They like all the data to go through their central switches, which does two things to it. One is that it makes it hugely expensive, far more expensive than, let's say, a decentralized system like the internet. A megabyte of data on the internet is typically 1 rupee in the country. And if you consider a megabyte of data sent via SMS, that's probably about 20,000 or 30,000 times as much. I mean, that is the kind of ratio that you have in terms of costs. And then not only are you paying through your nose, you're also, you have a system which is very fragile. The slightest bit of overloading and it's done. You know, any time there is a natural disaster, the roof of the telephone exchange falls on the exchange, and although all of us are walking around with transmitter receivers, nobody can talk to anyone else because the system is designed to go through their central switch. It's not a peer-to-peer network, and it never will be, because they want to make money on every little bit that they carry. The relationship between the internet and the telcos has been a bit of a love-hate one. I mean, they've made a lot of money from the internet, and the huge growth rates of internet bandwidth have been good for the telcos. But they never sort of quite reconciled themselves to it. I mean, back in the early 90s, Ranki will remember very well, when we had these tiny little internet providers, the Davids, and you had these Goliaths, which were all these big telcos, and they had these X.400, GEMS 400, and iNet, and all these networks that they had, which had the support of all the governments in the world and all the telcos in the world, and within a couple of years, they all sank without a trace. Whereas the internet survived. Later on, when it came to the dot-com boom, the telecom companies lost a huge amount of money. They invested in all kinds of technologies that did not result in anything at all. People are talking about bringing in 3G, but they've been talking about bringing in 3G for such a long time now. I mean, I've been hearing about 3G for 7 years now, and 7 years in telecom is so long that I would say that we can now safely say that 3G is a failure. Already people are talking about 4G and the other things to come before anyone's invested in 3G. Fundamentally, the telecom companies have not been able to lay down the technology standards since the 80s. And that is a critical failure, because just imagine if you were working with the same kind of computers that you were using in the late 80s. If you were using 300 baud modems and things like that. That's where the telecom world is today. Now, from those of us who've been in computers, and have white beards like me, will remember that we've had the same sort of a situation in computing as well. We had these large companies which were highly centralized, and what it took to change the paradigm, and this is where I'm coming to, the key point that I would like to make, is that we needed open hardware, like the Apple II or the IBM PC, where anyone could make hardware, anyone could make software, could write the drivers, change the drivers, bypass the operating system, do whatever you like. And that's how you had the PC revolution. People in garages then are now, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, who became very, very rich people. In telecom, the telephone is a very, very closed box, and we can talk about it. There are people who know this a lot better than I do. And that is a serious handicap. For example, when we're trying to develop software for the disabled, do we have a candidate for an open PC? Is there, let's say, for a blind person, if I am to suggest to that person, what kind of hardware would be ideal for you? The closest that I have come across to something of this kind, and I really, really like this, and perhaps others can help me, they know this area better than I do. The GNU radio, this is an attempt to do in telecom what was done in computing, that you no longer are dependent on the Nokias and these big companies to do all your R&D, but that people in garages can start doing their own telecom kind of work. Now, the advantage of a thing like this is that instead of having a separate device, which is a GPS, and a separate mobile phone, and a separate RFID reader, and a separate Wi-Fi, and a separate Bluetooth, all of those being separate devices, what you have is one device into which you download appropriate software, and it can play any of these roles. We are a poor country. We cannot afford so many different computers, particularly if you're poor. So if you have one device, and if it's there in the village, and you go there with your GSM phone, it recognizes you, gives you a connection, and you can talk through the internet. Something like that. It would be absolutely brilliant for the blind, a device like this, because you could have, if it's portable, where you can develop new software, where you can build in text-to-speech, where you can do all kinds of sophisticated work. And because it would be good for the blind, also very great for the illiterate, because these two categories we combine into this, what we call the print disabled. People who cannot understand text, printed text, but have no problems at all with spoken speech. And then, of course, brilliant for education. I mean, it's a big problem for us if you're trying to teach kids all these different wireless technologies that there are. Instead, if we had this one device, which could be multi-purpose, then we could give hands-on experience to our students in all these areas. So, basically, what is the GNU radio? I mean, here's a picture. I'm not sure it's such a clean one, but at the center you have an FPGA, which you might say is a chip which is programmable down at the interconnection level of the chip. And you have different daughter boards that you can attach for it to make different receivers and transmitters in different frequencies. And this is all open source hardware. All the software for this is open source. So there is a large library of software which has been developed, and you can use Python, which is a very, very user-friendly programming language, to develop applications in the telecom field. Things for which you need huge labs and huge budgets for now can be done quite easily, literally in people's garages. I have a URL at the bottom which is quite a nice article on this, but there have been articles in Wired. If you go to Wikipedia, you'll find very, very interesting stuff on the subject. So I would urge CDAC and all the education institutions and so on that are working in this area to take a look at this, because we absolutely need a good open source platform for the blind, for all our people, because we need to have the same device to multiple things. But while we wait for these wonderful new things to come, there are certain technologies which exist which are being grossly underutilized for poor people. And since we have a lot of people also from NGOs and other organizations, this is something that I would like to very quickly draw their attention to before I wind up. This is my last slide. Community radio policy has just been announced, and so now it is possible for people, this is the cheapest way to reach poor people. I mean, the AM/FM radio is the only technology that they can afford, so community radio is hugely important. CB radio, up to 5 watts. You can run CB radio, means both talk and listen, and 5 watts with a good antenna, you can go tens of kilometers easily, and you don't need a license for it. And it's something that is, again, grossly underutilized in this country, not so in others, and we need to do something about it. I'm very glad that there's been so much talk about mesh networking and Wi-Fi and so on all over the country, but using Wi-Fi to interconnect community radio stations and citizens band, these networks of audio stations, would be a very, very interesting way for illiterate people, people who don't understand text, to be able to use Wi-Fi broadband kind of networks. But also, a very interesting area to look at for mesh networking is the disabled. Say, for example, if blind people get together in a room with mesh networking, each could know that the other is there and who all are there, and when a person leaves or when a person comes in, you can share content. For people who are on wheelchairs, to be able to actually physically connect wires and so on becomes quite an issue. So mesh networking has a lot of applications also in the area of visibility, and I would urge my colleagues who are working in these areas to please take a look at this. I hope I have not gone over my time too much. I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Mehta. It's very interesting, this thing, and right away he starts with certain suggestions and solutions. Thank you. Now I will request Mr. Van.
Thank you, Chairman sir. Distinguished colleagues, friends of ICT fraternity in India, this is my homecoming and first official meeting I'm attending on behalf of Development Gateway South Asia Office. It has been my pleasure to travel all the way from the end of Africa to attend this program. The challenges, we have been talking, the emerging trends, you have been knowing about the emerging trends in ICTs all the morning, and I don't think I need to go into that. On this panel, I'll rather look into the challenges which we are facing. And my experience for the last 5 years, I was posted in Africa with the Economic Commission for Africa. And working with UN and World Bank programs, and particularly now because we are proud because India is a very big donor country there. This year we have invested $50 million in African telecom network. And it was our job to supervise that. But now we can talk about the challenges which we are facing. And I can talk from a recent report which I am preparing for. It's still unofficial, but these are the broad conclusions we are drawing. We, on behalf of UN ICT Task Force, there has been a summit in Lebanon last year, late last year, where we tried to analyze what went right and what went wrong in rural ICT and tele-access centers, ICT, telecommunication center, multimedia center, or community information center, whichever name you call. And UN agencies wanted to upgrade, scale up those some of the success stories. In Karnataka, for example, Bhumi, the land registration system and issuing of the land registration, land title cards through internet and kiosks in villages has been one of the highlighted programs. And so is my northeastern region. I belong to Assam. And this morning we heard about the 483 CICs. Now what about the usages? Unfortunately, sorry to say that the one thing we are not ready for, there has been a gross underutilization of these facilities in some of the areas, and this is what I want to highlight. Even where the dishes are installed, the B-sets, officially these are okay, and being an Indian, you know, if I write a very bad report about CIC and their mismanagement, I'll get a call from Delhi very soon. I might be persona non grata, my diplomatic passport to thrown within 24 hours. This is the circumstances we live in. But even with all kinds, I've been teaching English literature 12 years in university, so I know the language, how to write it. But still, at one point of time, we have to see that how and why not these facilities have not reached the people, and people have been unable to use this. One, basically, we are talking about awareness. The awareness level is very low, where we have put in the block information centers. And then the access, the affordability of the access, particularly in CIC, it is that the same particular person wants to send an email to a son living in Dubai or living in some parts of the world, and he wants to send an email. There's a Bharat Mail system where they print out and send a post. I don't know still it exists. The same person goes to a piece and pays for it, but does not go to the CIC because she has to wait for 11. We had all kinds of gender mainstreaming ideas. Somebody gave this idea to my government, and they said, okay, let us employ some of the women who are IT graduates and they want to do this CIC coordinating job. The funniest thing is that this lady to prepare, put on her very nice sarees and come to a village CIC in Assam. She takes almost 5 hours. By the time she reaches and opens the CIC, it is 12 and half. And by 2:30 she leaves. Assam is a very dangerous place, so this is a lady. She should go back home to her urban home, where her superintendent engineer father or her IS father is there. So this is how CIC in rural areas through gender mainstreaming is done. And this is where is the challenge is. If we have made it that the target population should reach, and at the same time, we have Drishti ICT kiosk in Assam, in the same state, run by an individual, on an individual basis, an unemployed 10+2. When we employed the CIC people, they went for BTech and went for PG diploma in IT and all these high-sounding degrees and nice-looking guys. And now this gentleman find it very difficult to walk through the village roads with his nice shoes and open the CIC at 9 a.m. in the morning or 10 a.m. in the morning as scheduled time. And this is what we have. We have to put more emphasis on the community's needs and community ownership of those ICT access points. This is one of the major challenges which I am facing. I'm talking very typical about it. I have made a study of the whole South Asia. I'm just rushing back from Jakarta. At one point of time, we have seen that in Malaysia, the eVaria project has gone very well. The ITC's e-Chopal program has gone very well. In all those access points, you have, and then again, the second part of the ownership when it is now we are facing it. Assam government does not put a single penny into the account of CIC operation. When 5 years ago we signed an MOU that we will take over when the central government funding will be withdrawn after 5 years of operation. The 5 years ended this March, last March actually. And we don't have a single penny allocated for that. We have 92 it's like if we have 92 rupees of revenue earning, we spend 242 rupees in cost in salary. This is where the budget runs in a smaller state in Northeast. Now again, the psychosocial gap. Just to check, verify what is happening. The CIC in my village district in Assam is it's the next room to the DM. It's just 10 meters. I had to send a fax. And I could not access a fax inside this auditorium, so I have a printout and I wanted to go out, but then I thought it is not worth doing this. So I have sent an attachment of a 1 page to be delivered to my CM because I'm traveling to some part next week. Now it will take 1 week. I checked it during the lunch, it is not still delivered. The district information officer has this typical job of communicating between. When I know this, imagine a villager asking for lodging a complaint over the internet against a road and something like this. So somewhere there is a psychosocial legal gap, that this is a letter, why should I take the printout, who will sign it if I give it, because the letter is a kind of bombshell. There is a road being made in my village, and somebody, my friend has called me on mobile and tell me that the road, the specification has not been maintained as per Assam PW schedule. So I'm writing the DM to transfer, because he has to go there and spot verify it. So that kind of bomb letter, no, nobody takes this. So this DIO will wait and find out an excuse why it is not delivered. Current was not there, sir. I tried, sir. The printer is gone, sir. The cartridge has not come, sir. I have asked for it, sir. So that kind of thing happens, where the psychosocial barrier is somewhere else, not the technology. Now, another challenge which is coming up again in reaching the ICTs is that the disparity in socio-economic terms, and where we have to touch this perhaps ICT 4D, is the social and economic disparity. The weaknesses of the people are so staggering in some parts of the country where we really want to reach. When we put a CIC last year, we were trying to put access to 1,000 schools in Assam to give internet connection to 1,000 schools on a test verify basis on behalf of my council, the Rural Technology Promotion Council, which I had. Ultimately, what happened is that somewhere down in the channel, because I was abroad and I passed this, and when I left, somebody, if everybody has seen G Pradhan Mantri Ji or Yes Minister series in BBC, then you very well know how it works. Somewhere somebody suggested that giving the rural computers, that kind of thing, the doctor was fearing, here the headmasters were fearing. Who will take care of these computers? Better you give it to the students. So it is only, perhaps we are the only state in India. We are giving a personal computer to each of the first divisioners. For a state like Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, this might be a very dangerous situation. The last year we purchased around 12,000 and half. So this is the total number of PCs we have to purchase and give it to each of the first divisioner in high school or high madrasa or any of the entrance levels. Now, half of the computers we put in, we thought that it will reach at least 12,000 homes. And those 12,000 homes, it comes with a 1 month internet access, and if somebody is interested, you can get it extended. Now, unfortunately, without enough of the awareness and without enough of the training, because those students, they have been in the village schools, and it is somewhere it is very interesting and it is encouraging that the students who are passing from the general schools, very limited numbers of them are they are in the top in the list, but the first divisioners, the majority of them as it is, are the villagers, the students from the remote areas, and they have no idea how to operate that. So some of them, they have just managed to encash the PCs. We give them a slip. Officially, 10s are distributed by a minister or somebody. Most of them get a delivery slip. You go to the nearest SR dealer or HP dealer, show it, and you take your PC home. Most of them, they don't have enough to take the PC home. They just exchange it. Now, this is where we have to come through. If we have to make the ICT access, people to access the ICT and use it, and this is where my area is, the Development Gateway Foundation, for example, is the area where we want to exchange development information on the net. Not only within India, we have 4 phase 1 countries now in South Asia. We are hoping to extend it to all SAARC 8, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal and Bangladesh in the first phase. And we want to exchange information on what went good and what went very well and what went wrong with some of our ICT projects. So I will invite all of you to share with us. We have a portal somewhere down. Washington wanted me to present a kind of, this panel, the formation of this panel, the formalities of this panel. This is how we are spread all over the world now. And we have this South Asian regional goals. I'm going very quickly, come with our website and address so that you can contact with this. This is the poverty alleviation and SAARC development goals. This is one of our agenda. And of course, some of the things are coming, people-to-people contact and cultural cooperation. Some of them are taken from SAARC declarations. we're starting with awareness, connecting good governance and development goals and coordinating policy and project implementation and development. As you said, I was posted in Ethiopia, for example, this morning somebody was talking about AMP in Ethiopia. And this is our website, sartic.org, and of course we have our development gateway.org program. Now, one of the things which came in very recently is that whenever an international organization or an international cooperation organization comes to work, it has to depend a lot on individual motivation, individual enthusiastic participation in some of our programs. I'll invite all of you to join us, to go into the website. Very soon we'll have the networking component added to it. It is just a prototype. We're scheduled to launch it this week. It has everything, there is a psychosocial barrier, and somewhere it is very technical. You'll be very surprised to know that last week, when the Development Gateway Foundation, this morning, our senior professor were telling that we get some of our funding from India itself. In fact, India is a founding member of Development Gateway Foundation. James Wilkerson, I met him many times in Washington. And one of very senior official in one of the ministry in India was to give some clearance from some of my work in Northeast. We are having a conference this week, so we need there's a security thing and all. So instead of saying this, there might be a problem to have a conference in Assam. He writes me a very nice paragraph. I'm going to show it to Pranab Mukherjee very soon, saying that development gateway programs are not approved by SARC headquarters, so this cannot be organized. So this is how one hand does not know what the other hand is doing. And I came only to know from this ministry senior person, they said development gateway activities has to be approved by SARC headquarters for what? So somewhere we are running into mental blocks where individuals are activated but the systems are not. But we see the ray of hopes when organizations like this, ISCT, conferences like this make us meet. And I think we are going to join hands together. And one of the way that India looks forward is that individual efforts has to join into the network, and ICT has given us this power of joining together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. You really touched upon some of the physical problems and some of the social gaps, etc., and other issues of maintenance. Again, highlighting some of the real experiences. Thank you. Now I will open the house for discussion. Please introduce yourself and also identify the panelist with whom you would like to interact.
Hi, my name is Tushar Ibrahim. I'm from the IOS in South Asia node at Chennai. My question is to Mr. Barul Islam. Could you talk about the costs involved in setting up a communication information center and costs of migration? Costs of maintenance.
It depends. We failed to do that comparative analysis. In fact, one of the assessments which we are making in South Asia, we wanted to make a cost variance because most of the data we have collected, they failed to identify the individual cost factor. But the CICs are very expensive because they have those big, VSAT and the infrastructure. They have made AC rooms, and in my tehsil, the subdivisional circle officer, he sleeps inside that CIC room because it is AC. He has virtually put his bed and everything there. And this is what it is. So it is expensive when it is CIC, but I have no idea. Right at this moment, perhaps some other people can say it, but ITC has put in something like 25,000 you have to put from your side, and rest of the money ITCP for the ECHOPAL projects and all. We try to identify, and Only yesterday we deleted the whole database, the column, where we put the monthly expenditure and annual expenditure, compare. Because when we find all the data from Malaysia and other countries, we are finding a lot of gaps. Because those project people, they have sent the questionnaire back, we try to contact them. Even CICs, they refuse or they don't want to give the actual cost which is involved.
Thank you.
Yes.
My question is for Mr. Baharul Islam. See, we also had some studies about community information centers in Assam, and in fact, one of my paper will be on community information centers itself. In the morning, I had some talk with Dr. Baharul Krishna, and in fact, community information center is having the last month this year, so this month itself. So how do you see community information centers maybe after 1 year? Because the state governments in Assam and in the northeast, they are not taking the responsibility of community information centers as of now. But the infrastructure was very good. So that was a, I think, potential tool for bridging the digital divide in the northeastern region, because you know, northeastern region is geographically isolated and it is remote from the center of the country. So that's why this type of tool was very appropriate for bridging the digital divide in such states. So how do you visualize, how do you see community information centers maybe after 1 year? Because the state government has not taken any initiative in taking over these cases. Thank you.
If government listens to us and with a kind of, we are saying that more of, there are, as you are from IIT Guwahati, and as you know, we have a lot of enthusiastic young entrepreneurs, young businessmen, young people who are really interested to take up these things in PPP basis. Yeah, on a PPP basis. So what we suggested on operational mode, we have to rather support a young person, and by this way we provide job to an unemployed 1 or 2 people. It can be a small self-help group type of mechanism. But again, we have to very soon make it non-government. In the sense that psychologically it should seem that this is not another block development office part. It should be an individual. Otherwise, as you know, our state government buses, they were the state transport buses. They were running with 1 bus and 7 employees. Now they are running very smooth with 2 employees. 12. Okay. Thanks for updating. I was stating my state a bit. But 12 per bus. Now they are running very nice with 2%. And they are earning money also, giving state government license fee, the registration fees, whatever they want to get the revenue. Now very soon we have to number 1. And number 2 is that we have to have a kind of link with the institute nearby. The student, for example, wherever there is a CIC, the surrounding area, there are 2 or 3 higher secondary students are there from 9, 10, 11, 12. 4 classes, we should very quickly compulsorily link them to CIC so that we create a cross-section of students who are at least aware, sending emails, getting papers written, reference done, and this can be done also through some young teachers who are appointed. The new teachers are very much aware of Yahoo and email or all this system. So we have young teachers there suffering under some, the old age headmaster maybe. So we have to support them and bring them out with that. This is two. One is operation and one is usage.
Dr. Ram.
Actually, wanted to have a small intervention in the dialogue that is interesting going. On the whole, I think all the presentation, the panel as well as the session is getting very interesting. On this issue, I think you talked about as a part of your talk, I'm referring to Mr. Baharul Islam, where it is located is a very important point you mentioned. In the case of Swaminathan Research Foundation, and there also they brought out in the case study, whether it is, one of your reports also pointed out very early, where you locate physically, like the way good old days, the well, where it is located is an important issue. In a village, where you locate it is a very important issue. So I think locational is a very important component which is going to be of value. Second is, somebody asked about the capex and opex. You talked about capex and opex. How much does it set up to capital cost? How much is an operational cost? As long as you make a business model by which operation costs are met, you have come a long way for quite a while before you can see later. Third is, I think when people talk about major model, people throughout the day, in the morning, perhaps a lot of very large programs. Actually, there is a place for large, there is a place for small. Sometimes breathing too much into large kills actually many realism into the whole thing. Take an example like this. Currently, even in the Planning Commission and many other debates, the community service center 100,000 versus CIC community, the 499 or 480 of the CIC in Northeast, and later Jammu and Kashmir and many of those, they were trying to merge the two because they were sort of a complementarily serving the same purpose. But if you see in the CSC, Community Service Center, it is doing some amount of, it's a PPP model. They were trying to underwrite some of the expenses. But the bottom line is they're not going to be viable overnight. They're underwriting some of the expenses. So similarly, as long as you have a mechanism by which the basic costs are somewhat met, you will have come a long way in convincing powers that be. So I think, well, some of you and well-meaning people, purely in the case study of CIC and many others, even in the case of CSC, because CSC is a very good, Dr. Ramani's talk on the kiosk was also exciting. So, and you talked about, madam, about content and the three issues you talked about, infrastructure and content and things like that. So, I think the CSC and CIC starting with, and some of you CSC, many issues if you all put together during your, evening, in the evening, if you have an opportunity to write together something, we can all take it forward to send it to the government, to all of us, various stakeholders, what they can do. So I think all put together. Did you refer to Skype kind of an idea, peer-to-peer networking?
When I'm talking about peer-to-peer networks, basically first we're talking about at the hardware level. That today when we're talking about the phones, your phone can basically only talk to one entity, and that is the telephone exchange. And they are kind enough to allow two of their connections to short, and so you can talk to someone else. Peer-to-peer network at the hardware level, my phone can talk to your phone without there being an exchange. Wi-Fi based mesh networks are like that. So on top of that, you will then naturally also want to run a large amount of peer-to-peer software, like all your Nutella and all your peer-to-peer networks.
We are game to play the game.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is that if you're talking about connectivity, really, there are two. One is the long distance, and that's optic fiber. And there's plenty of optic fiber, and it's not hard to put more optic fiber into the ground. Already we've got plenty. The only problem that we need to address is last mile. And what we have been suggesting is that why can't the government pay for the long distance connectivity out of the USO, so that we can actually provide free internet. Free internet, that is, we only pay for equipment cost, and we don't have any running expenses. And because wherever in the world the internet has actually, become successful right from the beginning, it was given free to them. I mean, Ramki gave us free internet connections, although he was not allowed to when the internet started, which was a wonderful, wonderful thing to allow the internet to grow at that point of time. So free internet is important, and really that is the direction we should go, rather than trying to meter. In the metering, what happens is that if in 1 rupee phone call, the cost of actually the call itself, it must be 1 or 2 paisa. The rest is the whole keeping track of who called whom, at what time, on what plan, and what is which SIM card, and all those complicated calculations. And then they have to bill you, and then you have a dispute with them, then you phone them and you spend 15 minutes arguing with them about 5 rupees on the bill, and they have to actually spend a lot of money trying to get that money out of you. So actually you are paying the telecom company for not so much for carrying your calls, you are paying them for the privilege of billing you. That's what they spend their money on.
Anybody? I think I have one question to Professor Mehta. See, standards, I agree with him that ultimately the standards which have to be laid down. He had touched upon putting some standards so that, and also he talked about new radio and its capabilities and all that. I will just, what's stopping it?
What is actually, we are not used to let's say, cottage industry hardware development. We have slowly got used to cottage industry software development. You know, people in garages developing their own software. We are still mentally and psychologically, we are waiting for BSNL or Reliance or somebody to please come to our village and start offering phone connections there. We are not sort of attuned to, okay, let us take our problems in our own hands and find our own solutions for them. See, I'm working in the area of disability, where the problem is that, my voice is down. I have to keep it closer. You know, in the area of disability, what happens is that if you don't have the disability yourself, it's very hard to put yourself in the shoes, let's say, of a blind person and then write software for her. It's much easier for a blind person to herself learn programming and write software that works for the blind. And so I think that really when, you know, there are a certain set of problems for which these big companies and multinationals and so on will find solutions. Those are problems for which there are plenty of rich people willing to spend money. So they are much happier working to give you and forcing you to buy one more phone and one more internet connection and things like that, rather than taking the internet to a larger segment of people, because then for that they have to substantially reduce their prices. Get to a point where we say, hey, if I have a problem, maybe someone can write the software for me, or I can write it myself. So it's that more than anything else. But I think if organizations like CDAC, which have a vision, which have an open source commitment, which have a development commitment, and have the muscle, I think an organization like this can take up something like this. This is open source hardware. Any number of people can develop it, can market it, and people building on each other's software is a much cheaper way of doing software development. Like for example, in telecom, Nokia develops its own software, Ericsson develops its own, Motorola its own. So all the three of them spend huge amounts of money developing exactly the same thing. And they all have bugs in it, and they all have problems. It's so much more sensible if we do it in an open source kind of a way, where if the problem is solved once, it's solved forever.
Thank you. Any, please.
I would like to share one experience. I'm from the Maharashtra. Ravindra Vaidya is a lecturer in the computer science department at Jain College. In Maharashtra, there is one company. Actually, it is a share of the government of Maharashtra and other universities also. MKCL. You heard about that. They have their setup, ATC setup, authorized training setups at the village level itself. Something 2,500 different villages, they have their setup. And by using that setup, they are now planning to have different governmental problems or something like a SETU is there in Maharashtra to provide the land records. Now they are trying to use that setup for the, what you can say, that giving the land records and all those things. So it is a very workable model, and before that they set up one course which is known as the MSCIT, a certificate computer course which is compulsory for all the government employees. And it is successfully completed the same thing. And they are using the same infrastructure for education also, same infrastructure for other governmental organizations also to collect the data. Why this thing is happening? Because Dr. Islam is talking about that the mentality of a person who is coming from outside and doing that work. In this case, the person who is from the same village is running that particular center. So whatever the problem of the community, maybe water problem, maybe land record problem, whatever the problem is facing by the same person. So he has some affinity to that particular community. So we can think from that angle, a person from the same area, we can deploy there, we can train them and do that. So I think that problem may be solved.
Thank you. I think now we are coming to close already. I think we have taken our time. I'll just briefly sum up. I think Ms. Chidrangi, she gave us a flavor of the experiences which they have in Sri Lanka, and the major problem she faced is regarding the content. I think the issue she raised was that of the access issues have been slowly taken care of, but content remains a big challenge. I think this content is always a challenge all around, but in India, I am very happy that there are certain organizations, even CDAC and Vidya Vishya type of organizations, they are very seriously looking at content generation, you see. This is one issue which I think once tackled, especially in the light of this connectivity becoming more and more available, and a lot of other solutions like some Professor Mehta also does. these are becoming available, from the country's point of view, from our own private issues also. That is one facility. Once that becomes available, the rest, most of things depend on content. And I think that is one area where special attention has to be given. And content in the local language. You see, this is another thing. I'm very happy that in India we have given special attention to the vernacular language and the local languages. I hope very practical solutions and those usable solutions will soon be available so that masses at large will be able to use whatever is available on the internet and other content in different languages, and it becomes available in their own language for use and enhance their other prospects of livelihood and other things. And Professor Mehta really touched upon some very interesting this thing, and looking into gender and urban rural divide and other also different this thing, north south and other. His solutions, some of the very practical suggestions he had, which not only addressed to very poor people who may not have that kind of education, to use this thing, but certain particular programs, they can really make this ICT a big difference in their life. Dr. Baharul Islam really touched upon this thing that really created some kind of very active interaction. He basically dwelled on some of the experiences, and I think Mr. Ramakrishna also, in a way, offered some kind of solution. So one or two of the problems, the problems which Dr. Islam touched upon are automatically, we are addressing in a different kind of way. He said that perhaps a PPT model is more successful. This experience is being incorporated from CIC to common service centers, which are being now established. See, the delivery issues will more or less remain the same, or perhaps more in CSC. But we feel that this experience where there is a village level entrepreneur who has a personal interest in running those things, systems will make these centers more viable, and his own promotional efforts will make it see to it that it is used more aggressively than perhaps the present this thing. And obviously he probably will be from the local this thing, so addressing the local needs and the local solutions. Ownership will also come from there. So this is I think I'm very thankful to the panel. They gave their very interesting presentations, and also to the audience for listening patiently and interacting. Thank you, gentlemen. I think I would like to close the session.